Well, welcome to Island Living today. If you've never been here before, just a little bit about what we do. It's a monthly series, and our goal is to help people live with greater ease on Vancouver Island. And we host this on the first Wednesday of every month. And each month, we're inviting different experts to share insider tips for homeowners and to answer your most burning questions about buying, selling, moving, or whatever our topical event or topical questions are of the night. This is made possible by three hosts, and myself being one of them. And if you're not familiar with who I am Denise Hodgins. I work with eXp Realty, and I service the Nanoose, Parksville, and Qualicum Beach areas. And I'd like to pass you over to Laura Healy. And Laura, take it away.
Well, I'm Laura Healy, and I'm based out of Nanaimo, a residential real estate agent, predominantly working in Nanaimo and the surrounding areas. And I've been in real estate for over 6 years with a load of experience. And I'm going to pass it on to Connie.
I'm Connie Henschel, and I mainly focus from Nanoose to Ladysmith, including Nanaimo. I have been in real estate for just over 13 years now, and I am actually going to introduce our guest speakers. So let me grab some information here. We are so happy to have today two guest speakers, Ryan Hill and Brad Clark. Let's start with Brad. There you go. Brad is the owner of A Buyer's Choice Home Inspections, serving Central Vancouver Island. He brings over 20 years of experience as a contractor to his current role as a residential and commercial property inspector and wet certified inspector. Brad loves to share his knowledge of house construction and blends it with a real estate lens. Brad happily explores the far reaches of your attic and crawl space so you don't have to. And in the process, delivers the information you need to make decisions for your home purchase and or home maintenance. We have with us today also Ryan Hill. Ryan is the president and founder of First General Services Vancouver Island. He leads a diverse team of restoration and construction professionals, and together they have completed over 4,000 property restoration projects across Vancouver Island. Ryan has worked on everything from water, fire, and wind restorations to asbestos, mold, and lead remediation. Serving Victoria to Qualicum Beach and operating a 24/7 emergency phone, Ryan's team creates peace of mind by guiding homeowners every step of the way during stressful times. We thank you both for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to be with us today. Laura, over to you.
Well, let's kick this really interesting session off. So I'm going to start off with Brad. And as this is the home inspection or series of our Island Living today, Brad, tell us, how do you look for moisture and mold during a home inspection?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite questions, because I get it, pretty well from every client that I talk to. Like, are you going to check for moisture? Do you have the tools to check for moisture? Of course I do. I do look for moisture in every house, but like, I'm not a water witch. I can't just walk around with two metal rods looking for water, right? So what we use is my infrared camera. For me, that's kind of where the entire home inspection starts. Is I walk into the house and I go around the entire property with my infrared camera, and I'm looking for any irregularities, because that gives me reason to dig deeper into it. Like, why is that irregular there? Put a moisture meter on it. Is it testing wet? Just, it gives me a lot of more insight than just, your standard tools or looking for staining in an obvious place, right? It gives me a little bit of well, my kids think it's like the super cool, like superhero tool, because you can kind of see behind walls. And but yeah, so that's my favorite tool. And that's realistically how we look for moisture. We use infrared to start. And then if there's reasons to dig down deeper, we use our moisture meter and then look for any ways to access that point to look for it without pulling stuff down, because we're not allowed to.
That's fabulous. And I guess you also, homes, I always say homes talk. They always tell you kind of what their scoop is, whether it's the type of plumbing, whether it's a crawl space, whether it's, just visible inspections. it's pretty neat what you can find by just paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now this is an interesting question, and again for Brad. When's the best time for a home inspection? Is it when it's pouring rain on our beautiful West Coast, or bright and sunny? Like, is there a time of year, a time of day? When's the best time?
Well, from an inspection standpoint, those frosty mornings are a little tough because you can't get on the roof safely. So I'll usually do the inside of the house. But realistically, for a potential buyer, anytime it's raining, you're going to find the most efficiencies. That's your best time to do it. I mean, it doesn't always work out like that. I mean, if you had a crystal ball, we would just, bring a big garden hose and dump it on top of the water or the roof and, do all our check downs. But it's not a perfect system. But kind of like alluding more into that question just a little bit deeper is, I think doing a home inspection is a great opportunity for those people looking to sell as much as it is for those looking to buy, because to do that inspection, and sorry, I don't know if I'm stealing thunder from a later question or not, but for the seller, you can get the home inspection done. I think in this market, everybody's getting their inspections done. So, unless the inspector completely misses something, all these things are going to get found out anyway. So I always just tell people that, like, get the home inspection done before you put it on the market. Give yourself the time to get prices for all of these items that are going to come up, so that, when it comes to the 11th hour, you're not negotiating, so to speak, on issues that just came up that day on the inspection. So kind of two kind of answers to your question there. I
really like that, because when I was selling my last home, I've only owned 2 homes, but when I was selling them, I know I did a pre-home inspection, first of all, and I was able to fix a lot of things before the fact. And I was also able to go into the sale with some confidence when, the home inspector who did the, and I'm not sure which company it was with, I can't even remember, but when they did it for the buyer and they flagged a few things, I had already kind of talked to my trusted home inspector who I was working with all the time. And I kind of was like, no, that isn't code. And, that isn't something to be concerned about. But I mean, I was able to, I always say it's the compounding theory when buying or selling, because if there's too many items in a home inspection, sometimes a buyer can get overwhelmed. But if there's only 2 or 3, it's like, oh, even when you're doing your walkthrough, you're like, wow, this is an immaculately maintained home. So think about that from the selling side. It's just like you're getting ahead. And a lot of the times, like, I think I spent $500 prepping the house, plus the cost of the inspection. Well worth it, considering I had peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you find you do a percentage of, like, more buyers than sellers, or is it pretty equal these days?
So I'm originally from Alberta. That's where I started out as a home inspector when I switched out of being a general contractor. And it was very prevalent there, where you would do it for the seller, and then you would sell your inspection to the potential buyer. Because the question always is, well, how do we know you're not working for the seller? And my answer is, well, number one, all I have in this industry is integrity. So if I lose that, I have nothing, right?
Oops.
Oh, I think we lost Brad. Oh, you're back, Brad.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you have integrity, which is good. We need integrity in the home inspector.
Yeah. So, like that's the biggest thing where we have to kind of start and stop. But we offer to sell it to the buyer, our inspection report, and that comes with, a full hour walkthrough of the property to explain what our findings were. Because to me, I think that's the biggest value added that we provide is the walkthrough time. Because anybody can look at a report, but all you're seeing is red writing and yellow arrows, and it looks like, even if it's a good house, it looks like your house is not as good as you think it is. Versus when you can do the walkthrough, you can get some context to all of the findings. It makes a little bit more sense.
Oh, that's
yeah.
So, hey, let's switch over to Ryan. And Ryan, we know prevention is the easiest and most cost-effective way to deal with water and mold problems. What are some steps homeowners can take to prevent problems from arising in the first place? And then if we miss anything, Brad, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks. First of all, just for letting me join in on this presentation and for that review of our company, Connie, that you provided. Good job. I could, I could use that every day of the week. Good job there. But yeah, as far as some recommendations for homeowners, I guess that's multifaceted. There's lots of reasons where, homes can suffer, issues with water damage. Some can be simple, environmental conditions, high humidity conditions that are not being resolved in a home. Perhaps, ventilation systems aren't in use, or, I've quite often arrive at homes where, certain rooms aren't being heated. It's baseboard heating, maybe not a forced air system, and that can create a combination of just environmental issues leading to moisture. So those are certainly things for homeowners to be aware of when they're selling and buying. When it comes to plumbing systems, I could certainly talk about some of the most common causes of floods. Number one being the supply hoses to a washing machine. Does your washing machine have the old rubber garden hose style, or is it a braided steel line? Those are, just changing to that braided steel line with a steel fitting might prevent that flood from ever happening. And even just, inspecting regular inspections. I'm sure Brad, I really like what Brad has to say about his services. Integrity. I mean, that's what it's all about too, right? But yeah, just people having a regular look at the water lines under their sinks, and are those braided steel lines, or are they old poly B lines? There's lots of things to look for as a homeowner, and to keep an eye on. Certainly leading up to the sale of a house. I love the idea of a pre-sale home inspection or a pre-listing home inspection. We kind of talked about last week. The worst thing is if a house is sold and I get a call, that's a horrible situation for everybody. So definitely getting, a company like Brad's in ahead of the listing happening. That's gonna be a benefit to the process in general.
So prevention is key, definitely. And it sounds like, to sum things up from this question point, airflow is key. So like if you have a rental property, I'm sure you see it lots, Brad, in home inspections where tenants are renting and they have the vents in the roof for airflow and they're closed because they feel like they're drafty, or they don't lift the blinds up. And I mean, homes are meant to breathe, are they not? Talk to us from your perspective. Like, is there anything where Ryan was missing on that? I mean, I thought it was pretty thorough, but I mean, yeah. I know we're meant to, ebb and flow naturally.
Airflow is key. I mean, that's, like this is a rainforest, right? I mean, it's year round, pretty well 100% humidity. If you're not moving air around in your house, you look at what today's building codes are. I mean, you have to have a fan that runs 24/7. I mean, you have to have a forced air system. I mean, you have to have a lot of air moving around your house, just because if you have those quiet areas where you're not moving air, there's lots of organic growth for, mildew buildup, and then that progresses from there. And, it's just a snowball effect, right? So yeah, the tenants, declutter, open your blinds, open your vents, don't put tinfoil on your windows, and, never open your blinds. Those are the funny things that you see. Yeah, it's preventative is key for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go on to the next question. So Ryan, when it comes to moisture and mold, when do you typically engage a homeowner, and what do you do for them?
I think my services might start out similar to Brad's. I show up to do an investigation. I'm using some of those same tools. I love the thermal imaging camera as well. It's a great way to walk through a home and get an idea of, if I'm getting called for, a mold issue, there's got to be a source of moisture there. So that can be a great way to establish where those areas of concern are. Sometimes it can be more related to a lack of airflow and more indoor environmental conditions leading to it. But yeah, that initial visit's more of a fact-finding mission. Sometimes people can get alarmed about seeing even a little bit of mold, right? That little bit of mold that might form in a windowsill, around the window cladding, just from regular, humidity conditions. And maybe, I could probably look at some windowsills in my own home and I might find some mold at times of the year. It all depends on that homeowner or occupant's level of kind of cleaning detail, I would say. So I could get a call for something like that, and I'm often, maybe bringing a sense of calm to that equation. That's something that's easy to turn that situation around. It could be something more significant where, I was at a home today where there's been a long-standing moisture issue, a roof leak issue that's been going on unnoticed for months, if not years, and there's significant rot inside a wall frame. So, you can have, that and, either end of the spectrum. So my goal is to show up, and, I'm there to inspect and on a fact-finding mission. I'm not there to answer all the questions on that initial visit. There can often be a lot other professionals that we need to involve to establish what protocols are and what the situation truly is, before we can really get all the answers.
So do you typically inspect a home like from the top down, or is there, are there three main culprits that you kind of find? Like, elaborate a little bit more, like if a homeowner is looking to do, like if they need to hire you, what are the things they could prevent to do in advance? Because I think that, like Brad was saying, it's just so key, like airflow prevention, like we obviously, like, we want to send you business because you're awesome, but we also really want to, like, make sure our homes are, like our homeowners are educated. This is the whole like the whole reason we do these series, is that either future homeowners or sphere of influence is educated. Like, not all mold is potentially bad. Speak to us a bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I'm most often called for a specific issue. So in terms of where my focus is, it might be directed towards a specific area of concern. We often do get calls, to inspect attics or larger, crawl spaces with moisture issues. And that might be more broad spectrum type of inspection scenario there. But yeah, it's, if I'm there for a specific concern, then, perhaps I'm focused on that specific area. And it's always about, if there's a mold growth issue, there's a underlying cause. And so, that's what I'm leaning towards, trying to understand as early as we can. Let's resolve the cause. We've got lots of great technicians that can deal with the remediation or the cleanup or the treatment or whatever is required. What's the cause? Let's make sure we resolve that so that it eliminates that from reoccurring.
You stepped perfectly into our next question. So let's let Brad kind of touch a little bit on it before we hand it back to you. So if we're tracing back to the root cause of water or mold problems, what are some things the homeowners could have done to prevent it, Brad? And from your standpoint, from the home inspection standpoint, and then back to Ryan to kind of highlight from his side a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. So, I always have a problem not coming off from not a salesy pitch here, but, I say, like, just by a show of hands, who would be willing to drive their car for 30,000 kilometers without getting an oil change? Raise your hand.
Well, technically I would, because I don't have oil in mine.
Yeah. Me too.
All right, who would go that long without servicing their vehicle?
No, negative, thumbs down.
Yeah, right. So, your vehicle is, let's call the median price $75,000, right? How often are we servicing our house, right? That's something that, let's call it a median price of 10 times that, Never, right? When is anybody jumping in their attic, jumping in their crawl space, pulling out their $5,000 thermal imaging camera? You know, when are people doing these things? The answer is never, right? And I'll use my older brother. I'll throw him under the bus because you know, I check his house annually, and mostly just for fun now because I always find things that he still hasn't done. But it's one of those things that you want to, it's preventative, right? Conditions will change in your house, materials will break down, things have a serviceable lifetime. So getting a home maintenance inspection is, in my opinion, paramount. I mean, you could alleviate, you know, a major issue, and this isn't to say that you're going to stop everything because things can change, but if you've got a small roof leak, that can be fixed and addressed, versus if it gets left, now you've got a massive cleanup and a big bill or an insurance claim. So, you know, the small fee of getting a home maintenance in it, do you have to do it every year? That might be a bit extreme, but you know, like you should have somebody popping up in your attic, getting in your crawl space, doing all of those things, because conditions do change, variables change. You know, maybe that one crack in your foundation has finally opened up and now it's allowing water into your crawl space. There's all these things that it's just worthwhile taking the time. Don't drive your car 30,000 kilometers without getting an oil change. Do the same thing.
I didn't know you guys did that. And so we were on the preparation call for this series, and I thought, wow, that's brilliant, because like, instead of subbing out the 3 different things, having someone look at the roof, having somebody look at the attic, you know, I didn't even know. And I mean, like you say, look, it could be prevented. Like the last time the guy was cleaning my gutters, he's also a roofer, and he said, oh, there's 2 shingles missing up here. Do you want them replaced? He says, I think you have them in your basement. And he says, $40 cash, I'll put them on for you. And I thought, heck yeah, you know, like, he kind of made a joke like, oh, that's, you know, lunch tomorrow or whatever. But I mean, it's so key, right? Because these are those things that, like, you are also trained and you also know what the current things are. Like for example, right now in one of our industries, we're talking a lot about different types of plumbing. And, you know, you see it every day in the home inspection, and, you know, polybutylene plumbing, stage 1 or stage 2. And, you know, the impacts of, you know, or yeah, actually, it was really well explained actually by your company, the lifespan of the infrastructure in a home, and that, you know, you could be buying a 30, 40, or 50-year-old home and if it's updated and maintained, just like that car that's serviced, you know, it will run a lifespan. You could rotate those tires constantly in the car, but at some point you're going to need to replace them, just like a hot water tank, you know, whatever the case is, just like a roof. They have a lifespan. And I think sometimes we forget about that when it comes to plumbing or electrical, because they're often big ticket items.
Yeah, and it's, you know, I won't drag on. I'll give you a chance here, Ryan. But it's one of those things that I think, you know, it's nice and easy to put the horse blinders on, because you know the roof is expensive, you know mechanical is expensive. But, you know, I'll put my dad hat on here and I'll just say, like, if you know a problem's coming up, you know, you can start budgeting for it, right? You know, if you get somebody in there early enough, you know, knowledge is power, right? If you can jump on your roof and know that, you know, you're getting towards the end here, like 5 years, you should be thinking about replacing this thing versus waiting 6 and you got a leak, right? So it's just one of those things, you know, like I said, again, knowledge is power. Finding out the information and then being able to deal with it is so much more advantageous than, you know, being reactive. You know, just it's kind of a shift in mindset. Take care of your biggest investment. Be proactive, not reactive.
Isn't that good advice in every part of life? You know, if you don't take care of your health, it's not going to probably end well for you in the big scheme of things. So Ryan, preventative, your company, what type of preventative services do you offer to clients? I mean, say you have elderly parents that, you know, might not be crawling up on that roof very often, might not be crawling up in that attic or in that crawl space. Talk to us a little bit about some things like, you know, like how many attics do you see that are heated or vented properly? Same thing as crawl spaces. You know, what are some things your company offers that can be really like advantageous to homeowners?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we do quite a bit of crawl space and attic inspection work seasonally. We get quite a few people calling. Unfortunately, it's usually in relation to a problem that they do find. So, geez, I really agree with what Brad's saying. I wish more people would seek out the services of an inspection company to be on a regular basis, like Brad saying, maybe even if it's every other year, you'd have a much more comprehensive understanding of how your house is performing. The reality is that I'd love to do more inspections for folks. We're often there because there's a problem, and we're there to respond to that problem and deal with it. So, and yeah, a lot of these problems we see every day could definitely be prevented if there was a more regular inspection done of those areas. And yeah, attics, crawl spaces, 100%. Those are areas I bet there's most people, hey, even myself, do I go up into my attic enough? No, I don't. And things can go wrong in a hurry there. Maybe some ductwork comes off of your bathroom fan and it's exhausting into your attic. It can turn a well-performing attic into a nasty environment in a hurry with a bunch of hot air exhausting up into the attic. So yeah, these inspections are definitely valuable, and couldn't agree more.
We see it a lot in home inspections that from the realtor standpoint, we always will see bathroom fans like you say, the tape that connected the pipe is just come loose from just, the heat and the heat, the moisture, you name it. And I mean, if it's just properly checked and maintained, what are other ones that, they're not pipes that are not insulated from the bathroom fan. So, it's hot and cold. And I mean, what's that, Brad? A few dollars at Home Depot to get one of those pre-made sleeves?
It's not much, yeah.
Yeah. And so talk to us now. This is the fun part of the conversation where you kind of get to give a bunch of free advice away. How does that sound? So, in a good way. Talk to us about some typical things you see in home inspections, and what are things that our current clients and future clients can jump on when they own their houses, starting from the top up. Let's talk about roof vents, and let's move to the attic. Let's talk about things that we should be looking at, whether it's in our home, our parents' home. Let's keep these homes all tickety-boo, so that when Denise, Connie, or myself go to sell a home, we get to sell the home in the best condition possible, or represent the buyer on it.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's start top down. I mean, just like painting your exterior trim, you do have to get up on your roof, and you've got to recover your nails that hold down all of your roof vents, your exhaust vents, your plumbing boots. They're metal. They expand and contract at different rates. So even if they are properly secured down originally, unless they're screwed down with washers, they will come loose. And then you've got a water entry point. And it sounds very minor, how much water is really going to get in there, right? There's shingles. I see it all the time. I go in attics that it looks like somebody shot through the roof with an Uzi. It's just, this rust bullets everywhere in the sheathing. It's a real thing, and it's so easy to fix that. So that's number one on a roof that I see all the time. And if they're not secured properly, what was it, 2018 with that huge windstorm? I mean, how many roof vents were blown off during that? I mean, countless, right?
I got a phone call saying the skylight blew off the house we bought from my adopted aunt. We found it in the property next door.
That's the other one. Yeah.
It was intact and not broken. We put it back on 4 hours later, thankfully to the roofer who came to my rescue.
Yeah.
But who would know?
And that's another key one, is that, your skylights, a lot of times they're not secured down properly. And, the trades out there, I don't think anybody's doing anything poorly on purpose. Nobody's just saying, kind of, the heck with it. But a lot of times people forget, right? You know, a lot of times the owner is going down to do the paperwork, you know, talk about the next job or talk about getting paid for that job with the homeowner. And he's leaving his apprentice up there and saying, don't forget to, you know, secure that skylight, and apprentice forgets. And those things happen, right? I mean, I was a contractor, mistakes always happen. But yeah, securing everything down to your roof, checking your chimney flashings. Those are also very important. And a chimney will tell you the story of what's going on. You can look for in the mortar joints, you can look for cracks. And I'm not suggesting that everybody get on your roof, because a lot of roofs aren't safe to access for the general public, right? If you're not comfortable on your roof, if you don't have experience doing it, you shouldn't be up on your roof, right? There's a special way to walk on different types of roofs and different times to walk on them. They're not always safe to access. And when it's 33 above, you know, you shouldn't be walking on your roof if you don't know how to do it, because you're going to do more damage to your roof than any good that you think you're doing to it.
It's really important. We're not encouraging you to walk on your roof, fall off your roof, any of those things.
Somebody should be up there that's
Hire a
competent and qualified to be up there. Yes.
Well,
So-
you touched briefly on how, like, sometimes people overlook the fact that new homes should have home inspections done. And I know multiple times we've found things on brand new construction, and often a client will say to us, but it's brand new, why do we need it? But the home inspector also helps with the deficiency walkthrough. It's so key.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a building background, right? So, and sometimes, you know, when I first started doing them, builders would get upset with me, and, you know, I kind of just, you know, I had to give them a different lens and say, listen, I'm here with no emotion, right? So I'm here to look at the house as a house. Is it functioning as it's intended to, as a new construction? I don't have any emotion. I'm not picturing that's where my grandkids are going to play. I'm not picturing this is where my new baby's going to have their crib set up. I'm just looking at the house as a house. I'm not looking for every little paint deficiency in the wall. And then once I kind of explain it to the builder, they're on board. They're like, yes, let's do it. And for the home buyer, they get a full comprehensive list of, this is how my home should look when I move in. This is how it should perform. And it's a kind of a win-win for everybody.
Well, it's a total win-win, because it's potentially saves that builder from coming back to have to do something pertaining to home warranty in the first year. So why not catch it right away? You know? So before I cut you off, you were talking about chimneys, and they tell the story, and then moving down from there, and then we'll pass it over to Ryan once we kind of get a few of the home inspection things. I know attics are one of my favorite in home inspections.
Okay. Yeah. So chimneys, you know, like, I've got a long masonry background, and, you know, your mortar joints, they're going to give you a story of what's happening with that chimney. You know, like, can you see cracks? Can you see white, that chalky efflorescence coming down from there? You know, like, where's your water entry point? Like, you know, it's definitely not above where the white chalkiness stops, right? So you can really look for what's happening with your chimney. You know, is your flashing properly secured? Because in my experience, chimney flashings, especially if they're inset in the house, not on the outside of the house, those are your major, you know, water entry points, because there's such thermal expansion, contraction, and movement. They have to be spaced away from the structure. So they have to have allowance for movement, but it's all those things factor into opportunities for water to enter.
Okay, really interesting. I didn't really, I mean, I know that's important and I see them in home inspections, but I didn't actually think of the interior versus exterior, but it makes complete sense. Just like something wrapped in a blanket, you know? Yeah. Okay. Ryan, let's talk about attics from your standpoint. You know, what are some prevention things? You know, I know they make solar vents now. They do all these cool things.
Yeah, those are
On board. He says,
Yeah.
bring all the solar vents, Ryan.
Yeah, solar vents. Yeah, you know, ventilation we've talked about it inside the home. It couldn't be more important in an attic, and it's easy for those, you know, those things to get out of balance. You know, I see it quite often where, you know, these good intentions can, you know, it pays to have a qualified insulation specialist. You know, there's definitely science behind how an attic performs. So just, you know, having somebody come in and pile a bunch of extra insulation up in the attic isn't always the answer, right? So definitely checking that attic regularly. And, you know, if there's an issue, hey, you know, we can certainly help, you know, connect people with, you know, with great trades who can, it can help to correct it. You know, if someone's got an unfortunate incident where there is mold growth, I mean, that's not uncommon. I'm sure, Brad, you've seen, you know, sheathing up in the attic gets black, and trusses can be discolored, and you know that might be a case where mold is growing, and we have processes to deal with that. Sometimes it's a localized treatment, sometimes it's a full-fledged abatement, but you know, that's certainly something we can help customers with if they face that kind of a problem, for sure.
Talk to us a little bit more about that, because, you know, we got you on the hot seat. So, I mean, I guess you're first of all starting by testing, and then what are the kind of are there 3 typical types of things you're finding growing on the plywood? Are there, you know, like, so often we see it in home inspections due to lack of ventilation, due to that, you know, like you said, that bathroom fan disconnected, the 1970s home with not enough roof vents, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, again, I go back to this scenario of sorting out what is the cause, right? Sometimes it's something really obvious that, you know, that scenario of a duct coming off. You know, Brad's probably seen this as well. You go up into an attic, there's some, you know, duct work has come off, and it's like right there, right? There's a black, you know, halo in that area, and that's a very clear indication of where that you know, that's easy to correct that issue, and maybe just a localized treatment would suffice there. You know, these things can also be a little more complex, where if there is you know, an airflow issue where, you know, there's just not enough cross ventilation occurring, you know, and you know, maybe a wider ranging mold issue is at play. That would be a scenario where, you know, perhaps we're having to engage a third-party hygiene firm to come in and collect samples and determine, you know, or help to determine the best course of action to address that properly.
Okay, fantastic. That's super interesting, because I know that there's autoimmune conditions related to mold. And also, I mean, I don't really know any homeowners that want to have mold, you know, whether it's the good or the bad mold, whether it's the, you know, mold going on your fruit in your fruit bowl, or, you know, like you said, in your attic, really in your living space. So let's toss it back to whoever wants to take the lead. Let's talk about crawl spaces. And because I know that not all homes are built, you know, like with crawl spaces, but you know, there are a lot of homes in Vancouver built with a crawl space. And I mean, let's talk about the pros and cons of a crawl space from both a home inspection and a mold perspective.
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, crawl spaces, you know, like they're a great space for your house. And that's not just for storing your Christmas decorations. You know, it's great for, you know, doing renovations on your house. It's great for allowing everything to ventilate properly. Again, airflow. But crawl spaces are also problematic because they are basically a condensed version of a basement, right? So we have a space that's very prone to moisture. You know, if you were to look at most every crawl space, and you know, you were to core a piece of concrete out from that floor, you know, you're going to see moisture underneath that slab. So for people to see moisture in their slab or in their basement or crawl space area, it doesn't directly mean that you have water issues in your home. It means that, you know, it's a seasonal thing. You know, if it's middle of August and you've got a wet basement, you got a problem, right? But if it's, you know, middle of December, it's been raining for 2 months straight, and your ground is a little bit moist, yeah, you want to make sure that, you know, we're doing all the preventative things. But as a whole, a lot of people want that flat rancher, and that flat rancher is problematic from a design perspective because you're not moving water away from your property. So properly grading water away from your foundation is paramount. I see some of these houses and I just want to go and talk to the builder and just give him a hug and say, who hurt you? Why did you build this house so low? Why, like you could have just lifted that house up. I know people don't want steps, but you could just put a little bit more slope on your front sidewalk going up to your house. There's all these things that could be done. And anytime I, suggest, you need to get a piece of equipment in here and move some dirt around, it's like, but realistically, all these things can be done really easy to ensure that your crawl space stays dry, because that's the name of the game. That's the goal of it. And then with the technology of today's builds, they should be dry, right? But yeah, the ventilation is problematic for a few things. So I won't hold on to this whole conversation. So Ryan, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, Brad maybe has more of a love on for crawl spaces than I do, because crawl spaces can be difficult, and maybe because of the varied types that we see on the island. I would say, like, if they were all brand new crawl spaces built to modern code, that would be fantastic. But I've been in some horrible crawl spaces. I try not to go down to a crawl space anymore. I try to leave that to our very skilled and willing and fantastic technicians. But yeah, it's, like we've been talking all along, ventilation, such a key. Couldn't agree more with Brad. Often I'll come to inspect a crawl space and none of the downspouts are connected, or it's a horrible grading issue, and you can see that the basement's going to be wet. It's in the middle of December. It's been pouring rain, and the backyard slopes down towards the basement. So those can be challenging when it's an older home. Maybe there isn't a concrete slab and it's a dirt floor, or there's just gravel on the ground, and maybe there isn't appropriate ground cover. And so that's where we come in. I would say we do a lot of work to try to help people improve their crawl spaces, and improving ground cover if there isn't ground cover. Perhaps improving ventilation and insulation around the perimeter, and bringing some heat into the crawl space. I see a lot of people making efforts to improve their crawl spaces if they're older buildings, and but it can be challenging for sure. Yeah.
So before you start the project, consult either yourself, Brad, or yourself, Ryan, because you guys can give them really valuable advice in the right way. So if you're going to do some drainage work, if you're going to do, a renovation, you always want to make sure you're getting, like the Envirotech guy who I worked with said, you really want to make sure you're really getting that house in the best shape, the exterior of the house done before you make the interior pretty, because so many people focus on the fancy countertops and, the new faucets. But if the outside's not secure and the water's not flowing away from the home, we see it all the time. We go, wait, this property has a beautiful creek up above. Oh, why is this really musty when we put our head in the basement? And I mean, unlike you, Ryan, unfortunately, I go in a fair number of crawl spaces. So, because often, you have to kind of take a peek and see what you're doing, because it can be a big factor on, is this home the right one for the buyer or not? But I do take preventative measures and wear a mask and things like that, because it's absolutely necessary. So this has been super, super informative. And I would love to open up our session to any questions that our guests may have. So feel free to put up your hand, turn your camera on or your mic, or put them in the chat. And Denise or Connie, do you have questions to our two wonderful speakers who have given up their evening?
Well, if there's no questions from the crowd, I actually do have a couple. Anybody have a question that they would like to pose before I impose myself? No? Okay. So we talked a lot about, the attic, the roof, the crawl space, and lastly, the crawl space, moisture in the crawl space. And the last few home inspections that I've been to, there's been a really big emphasis on perimeter drains. and perimeter drains being one of the culprits of crawl spaces. And that should be part of your maintenance routine for your home. Like, in addition to looking for all the other things, you should have your crawl space or your perimeter drains fixed. Now, I don't even know what that entails. I've yet to have a perimeter drain inspection. I don't know how often you should do that. Can anybody get some insight for us on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just kind of great point, Denise, for sure. That can be a huge contributing factor. And yeah, there's lots of companies, different plumbing companies. Not all companies are specialists in perimeter drains, but there's lots locally who can help with that. And, I would say that annually, that is something that people need to be
Annually, okay.
of those perimeter drains.
So is that a matter of scoping them, or what do they do to check the perimeter drain?
Well, I guess it can depend on the system, but I think with the vegetation on the island and, especially when you get into older homes and the root systems, it doesn't take long for a problem that wasn't there to occur. And so, I don't know if Brad would agree with the annual inspection there, but that's what I would certainly try to recommend. Because I mean, most people find out the hard way when they have a real problem in the basement.
Exactly.
And, unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's when I see the crawl spaces is when there's a real issue. And, if something drastic has to happen, to deal with the perimeter drains, perhaps that could have been prevented just through annual inspections,
Well, Brad, do you mind also telling us a little bit about kind of the timeline of how perimeter drainage has changed? Because I think sometimes when we're on the real estate side of it, we're seeing, the old clay tiles moving to the plastic, Big O moving to the good, newer white plastic. And then often Align home inspectors are saying, and I've heard your company say it too, is stop planting trees and vegetation right next to the home. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about it, because I know that I've heard people say, yearly, like what Ryan's saying, Denise, and I've heard people say, shove a hose down it, and if it flows back up, you've got a problem. Not advice I recommend.
Yeah, I probably fall somewhere between there, to be honest. I mean, I would consider it system-based, and we're going to be rolling out perimeter drain scopes here shortly with our value-added services. But it's kind of like with a house. I think you have to, and I will touch on your question about the changing systems. But I think that you have to get a system evaluation. Just like when I do a walkthrough with clients, I say, unless this homeowner can provide you with a record that they service their furnace and their hot water tank and whatever else this calendar year, get it done yourself. And I would say the same thing with anybody purchasing a new house. If they can't show you a record of this calendar year that they have had it done, get it done. And then you will have a picture of what your system looks like. If you're on rock, if it's a newer PVC drainage system that's going to the storm sewer, and then you've got a big old pipe at your footing level that's taking groundwater away from your house, you probably don't, in my opinion, you probably don't need to do it annually. But yeah, if you're on an acreage with lots of trees with big roots, encroaching on your foundation, your perimeter drains, it's probably something you want to do more often than not, because you might not be able to see it with that perimeter drain scope, but the next year those roots might have come through. So it's not I don't think it's a hard, fast rule on when you should do it. I just think it's something that you need to have your baseline for it, and you need to have a professional kind of give you a guideline on, should you be doing this annually, every 2 years, every 3 years, depending on your system. Now back to your question about like the drainage system. So originally Vancouver Island used to just be one drainage system. So everything drained off of your roofs, into your tiles, and that carried everything away. Now it's code that you have to have 2 drainage systems, and that's perimeter drains, which are generally about 18 inches below grade, They pick up that water and that comes off of your roof down from your gutters, and that goes into your storm sewer. And then you also have to, depending on the style of build, slab on grade, you're not required to, but if you've got a crawl space or you've got a basement, you have to have a second tier of defense on your property, and that's your footing drainage, and that'll be a drainage pipe that goes around your property that allows groundwater percolation into that right at your footing level of your foundation wall, and that'll then pick that up and then send that away as well. So you know, going back to the scoping of it, if you've got the old concrete tiles, you can't scope them generally because they don't have a big enough sweep on the tile. You basically just send your camera down and you don't. So you can't always scope it. And for the most part, they're probably fractured, collapsed, not scopable. And at that point, you're just kind of rolling the dice on what do we do with it next, right? So
Get a shovel out and start digging.
Unfortunately, I mean, you know, like, are there signs that there's an issue, right? I mean, if you're on rock, you know, it's probably not that big of a deal to have, you know, runoff leaders, you know, which are just downspouts with extensions that kick off of it, as long as you're not flooding or shedding water onto your neighbor. You know, there are because that can happen. There are things that you can do to mitigate that water that's coming down without getting super expensive and redoing your whole perimeter drain.
That's fantastic. So we've got a question in the chat. Is it worthwhile to have water leak detectors under the sink and by the hot water tanks? That's my add-on to the question.
I'm hearing that this is going to be, and this is just me talking out of school, but I have a few friends that you know, are brokers with insurance companies, and they are telling me that this is going to become a requirement with water sensors near all these sensitive areas. And if you're not having them, then you're not getting those reduced rates, and you might suffer, you know, not being covered for a water event. So
I heard that you need to have them and that they were Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connected, and they would send you a message to your cell phone. I know that ones we had previously used, you know, we used to give them as gifts, were the ones that would just send off the loud, like, sound, and you'd plunk them in, and you know, if you could find them at Home Depot or online, you know, we'd buy 10 or 20 and hand them out as gifts, and they were valid for so many years. So, well, I know the insurance industry is constantly changing, same as, you know, all of the things in home ownership. Denise, you mentioned you might have another question before we wrap up for the evening. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I was muted. Yeah, if nobody else has a question, the staining on sheathing. So I can count on one hand the number of houses that I have been involved in a home inspection, and there has not been staining on sheathing. And it's a very alarming thing for people to see. People automatically get very, very concerned. The first thought, of course, is mold and expense, lots of money. It just sort of goes hand in hand. That's the feeling that people have. Is it true that if you see staining on sheathing, it's always mold? And is it always an expensive remediation, or are there different levels of issues with that? And I apologize for the sun. This particular window, I don't have a curtain, and I have no choices here.
Ryan, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, sure. I see what you see.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in so many attics, and yeah, I mean, Vancouver Island, like we talked about, it's a rainforest, and it's a punishing climate, and it's a difficult climate for attics to perform as they would in you know, somewhere like Calgary, where it's, you know, bone dry there. You know, that, you know, I guess the first thing I would say, discoloration on sheathing, you know, isn't always mold, you know, and I think I would always recommend, if somebody's concerned about mold, yeah, you know, definitive laboratory analysis needs to be done to confirm that. You know, but yeah, it's not uncommon to see some discoloration on that sheathing, and if it is, if it ends up being mold, you know, perhaps a localized treatment depending on the severity of it, perhaps a localized treatment can be sufficient, or some, but it can lead to something more for sure, depending on the significance of it. Again, I think the key is understanding what's at the root cause of that, and can we do something to change that airflow, or reconnect a duct, some ducting or whatever needs to be done to correct the cause in the first place.
So you've gone in, you've seen the discoloration. It's turned out to be mold, but it's the sheathing is still viable. It isn't damaged. You've treated it. The mold is now gone for all intents and purposes, but it's still stained, correct?
It depends. There's lots of great products out there these days. There's some chemical applications that we use that have bleaching agents in them that are amazing, right? There's products that we can apply to the sheathing that it can look horrible to start with, and once this is applied and allowed to dwell for its appropriate dwell time, it looks like brand new sheathing again.
Interesting. Is the testing very expensive and is it a non-destructive testing?
Yeah, generally non-destructive. So companies there's multiple local indoor environmental hygiene firms that we work with that will come out. They'll do what's called a tape lift. So they'll actually collect a sample, analyze what species of mold it is, and make recommendations based on their observations, and in conjunction with our training and know-how as well. We'll generally come up with a scope and a process to either to treat or remediate the issue.
Okay.
Those type of risk, it really it's a case-by-case basis, I suppose. Generally these like hygiene firms, they charge hourly for their time. So depending on what the access is like, sometimes attics can be really easy to get into, others maybe not. I was at an attic the other day where the hatch was in a walk-in closet, and it was full of contents, and there was closet shelving almost right up, like it was almost impossible to get inside this attic. So can really depend. So but generally something like that, it's in the hundreds of dollars, not in the thousands of dollars, in terms of getting the laboratory testing and that initial analysis of what that situation is and what needs to happen next. But beyond that, it really is it's a wide spectrum that could be in the hundreds of dollars up to the thousands of dollars to correct. And if you get to a place where sheathing is damaged to a point where it needs to be replaced and roof shingles need to come off, you can imagine costs can escalate on these things. So right back to that preventive, get a guy like Brad in to check, or perhaps myself in to check that attic more regularly. So if a problem does occur and we see some little spots here and there, you can be aware of it and address a small issue quickly and effectively, as opposed to being surprised 5 years later and dealing with something that maybe is a little more punishing.
Like everything in life, right?
Yeah, things don't resolve on their own. Usually, they often, if there's a problem, it needs a proactive solution.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for all the information tonight. Really appreciate your time. I don't know about everybody else, but I learned a lot. Yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And thank you everyone for attending our session. We really appreciate your time. And next month, we're going to be doing another inspection series, this time on insects and rodents. So it is that time of year with carpenter ants, and they are busy zipping around.
I have sugar ants in my room right now.
I have a few carpenter ants. So yes, we're going to be talking about our friendly little pesky pests. And yeah, hope that everybody can attend. And thank you again, Ryan and Brad, for your time. Really appreciate it. You guys are top notch. We love working with you. Have a wonderful evening.
Welcome. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank
Thanks,
you
thanks so
very
much
much.
for
Thank
thinking of
you.
us.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
I know.